It's Children's Mental Health Week, and we're exploring the power of paying attention to what's going on inside, discovering clues from our thoughts, our feelings, and our bodies. Hello, I'm Kathryn Lovewell, author of The Inner Detective Journal, a gentle guide to help young children make sense of their inner world, especially when life feels difficult. We are shining a light on the importance of children's mental health, so every child has the opportunity to learn skills to respond to themselves kindly when things go wrong, which they inevitably will. So let's hear from one of our special guests now. Welcome to another brilliant and I think crucial conversation about Children's Mental Health Week. Today I have, I think, quite an extraordinary woman with me, Jo Davey. Jo is the chair of Sutton Foster Care Association and has been a foster parent herself for over 12 years. I have witnessed firsthand just how amazing she is with her foster kids, and I think she has got a lot to share around children's mental health and specifically to support children that we know have already been through a lot. So welcome, Jo. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Nice to see you.
So, Jo, as a foster parent, what's different? What are you facing when it comes to children's mental health as the child maybe comes and walks through the door, or if they've been with you for a while?
I think first and foremost is that you are likely to be working with children who are trying to make sense of their world, whether it was when they were with their family. If there's chaos and neglect, they may not identify that it was chaotic and neglectful, but it will be different to perhaps what their classmates and their peers, their home life situation. So they may be involved in a group who, they come home from school and the house is tidy and the parents come back from work and they have a meal and they all sit happily watching television or playing games. You are likely to have children who come back to an empty house where there's no food they can snack on, there's no food for dinner, and they don't necessarily understand that that's not the way it should be, but it still doesn't make sense when they're comparing themselves with their children. They try and make sense of it. And I suppose they sort of steer it. Well, it's okay because I know my mum will come back at some time and I know there will be food in one way or another, but it must be immensely challenging to understand, even though they know it's not quite right. And when there are cases where children are then put in care, the challenges that these children must face is that, I suppose when you don't have parents that are coming home from work, then their freedom is then taken away. They have to come home from school. They have homework that they need to do. Maybe they're getting involved with cooking meals and sitting down at a table with people they don't necessarily know. And all the while thinking, well, where's my brother? Where's he? What's he doing? Where are my parents? It must be one of the biggest challenges for a child to go into a care, to live with a family who they know nothing about, because sometimes there is no meet and greet. It's just on the day where they are told by the judge that they are going into care and they may go empty-handed. I cannot imagine how challenging that is for them to get their head around and to try and understand it. So really, first thing, I think it's all about building relationships. You have to take it slowly, take it quietly, so these children can just work out in their own heads about the situation. Why has this happened? And that may take a really long time. We had one child in care who never came to terms with the fact that he was in care. He didn't care that he was neglected. He didn't care that there was no dinner table to sit down and that there were random times for eating where they would just jump on the food. That did not matter to him. He just wanted to be with his family. So how do you explain that to a child, that your parents weren't good enough to look after you effectively? You wore inappropriate clothing. You had, no sets of pajamas and you wore your school uniform to bed. That was his normal. So, yeah, very conflicting thoughts I can imagine going through their heads.
What that's doing to their mental health, or whether there's any sort of stability going on, all obviously depends on what age this is happening as well, because of course children can be placed into care at a very, very young age and throughout their teens right up until they become an adult at 8, well, as deemed an adult at 18. So what sort of signs and symptoms and challenges do you see in a child that has experienced this level of challenge, neglect and difficulty in their environment?
There are so many different ways that children show their confusion, I suppose. There's a lot of anger. Sometimes they could be very deceitful. They can make allegations because they think that if they make an allegation about your care, that they will be sent back home, but that often it's not the case. They can be disruptive, show really challenging behavior, from getting up in the morning, not wanting to attend school, and it's trying to make sense of it. So it could be as simple as slowly just building relationships with these children, actively
Mm.
listening, actively letting them speak, showing them that you care, showing them that you're not going to replace their family, but showing love, care, and attention, and really building a solid base to build a relationship with them. And I
Mm.
think being honest, obviously you wouldn't give them information that, they don't need to know, but just being honest about the situation and helping them steer through it. But it's really important to listen, because their ideas of why they're in care may be completely different to the actual reasons why they're in care. And
Mm.
of course, sometimes they don't want to share this information with their friends at school because they're embarrassed or they don't really understand it. And also, they may not be able to go back to these friends' houses anymore because, you need to be careful with, some of their influences and some of the situations going on in other people's homes. But it's really a case of building a stable relationship with that child and then learning to work with them. I mean, all the situations are different while children in care, and they are affected in different ways, I suppose, as far as their mental health goes. You don't know whether they were previously supported, whether there was an underlying issue beforehand, what has affected them. Could there be drugs involved, alcohol involved, domestic violence? So it's just a case of really listening actively and supporting them in any way that you think is the right way for them to build a relationship with you. Yeah, and just respect who they are.
So what I'm hearing, Jo, is that, when a child is in foster care, for that foster parent to be fully present with them, to have that active listening, to give them as much of your presence, that sort of real grounded stability that they may never have experienced before, and may be quite discombobulating for them to have that type of attention at first, but to be there steady, that solid ground to help them see that actually they can move through this no matter how many challenges they've got. And that must be pretty challenging on the foster carer as well, to have to hold steady when there are big emotions, I know big tantrums can happen, big explosions, lots of upset. How do you've mentioned the active listening and being present for them, respecting them, giving them space. How do you encourage them to start making sense of their world, or looking at how they can look after themselves, really?
I would just add one thing to that. You may not be the first foster carer that these children have come to. They may have had broken relationships with, other sets of foster carers as well. So you have to gain their trust. They may have had a really rough time with the carers. They may have had their own children there that there were, relationships weren't strong. You may feel like you were always the extra one or the spare one. So that's worth thinking about as well. But I would say you look for their special thoughts. You look out for their special interests. What makes them happy? What makes that ordinary, plain, non-smiling face into a happy face? Something they're comfortable with and something that they can do and they can achieve. And I think it's all about expanding that, rewarding if necessary, and showing them that they do have strengths, they can show resilience, and they can really do something if they put their hearts to it, and really being supportive. I think children in care are always going to be thinking they're not important enough, that they don't belong. And I think to show them what skills, what qualities they have, and supporting them in whatever they want to do is so important, and making them feel part of your family and your life.
Yes, belonging and inclusion is such a big issue, isn't it? I think for all children's mental health, for, that sense of I belong here. And that's actually the theme of Children's Mental Health Week this year. This is my place. Well, if they don't have a place, that it's very hard for a child to really know, well, where do I fit in? How can I belong? And that must be incredibly difficult to bring that sense of belonging to a child that really feels that they don't fit, and they are different, and they know that they're in extraordinary circumstances. How do we support a child that's been through all of that?
Yep. It's all about building trust and positive
Mm.
attachments to construct their identity and develop a strong sense of belonging. When you have children in care, it's really nice to for them to have their own room with their own things, with the things they want and they've chosen, a name board. That is their place. That shows them that they belong, they're wanted, and they're valued, rather
Mm.
than their bedroom looking different to your own children's bedrooms, for example. If they got, sufficient clothing, can they do additional things outside of school? All of that. It's all about treating them the same as your own children. Otherwise, that don't do that sort of work. Make that
Mm.
child feel that that is their home and they are valued and supported. Yeah,
Mm.
because children's mental health can be so fragile. And of course, all this time that they're in care, they're always thinking about what their siblings are doing. Are they going on a better holiday? Are they getting more time? Do they have attention when they want it and need it? It must be really hard to compare when you're part of a big family, sibling group, that to not really know about what your siblings are doing as well. And that must affect your mental health. Am I being as cared for as well as them? Do I,
There even be guilt that they're having a really lovely time and
absolutely.
they are being taken on a lovely holiday or out to the park and doing fun activities, learning to cook, and just really amazing. I've seen all the amazing things you've done and do with the kids that are under your care, really supporting them with life skills. They may be very aware that a sibling is not receiving that level of attention. And that
Yeah,
must be quite difficult to navigate too.
that's very true. And of course, there are contact between siblings, although they don't live together necessarily. They will have meetups with the family members, which can often be chaotic in itself as well when there's a big family, all striving for attention from the parents. And then, they come back to your home and they're all again discombobulated because they've got conflicting ideas. Well, that's not fair. You went on holiday and you spent more time talking to mum, and then you've got to, build up a sense of support again, because that could all have been quashed while they're out with family again, and there's no structure to the day and conversations. I just think it's really important you will all to show them that you'll always be there for them. You will always support them and guide them, even through when they leave, when they're care leavers, to know that there is still a solid family that they can come back to. It's so important. We recently had a child leave our care, and we're in constant contact with them. We met up with them to go out for dinner, and I said, "Oh, have you seen your mum since for your birthday?" "No, no, I won't. I won't do. Why not?" "Well, it's just something we don't do." And I thought, "Oh, thank goodness we're here to support you. Birthday's birthday, but it's so nice to be celebrated and shared with somebody that thinking of you." And that can impact their behaviour. How does that make them feel for the day if it's their birthday and they've not been contacted by anybody, regardless of their age and gender? Just to be valued and loved and know someone's thinking of you, that would impact on your mental health and how you're feeling for the day. It's important to stick with them, I think, through thick and thin. There are going to be upsets and they're not going to make sense of everything they're thinking about, because possibly they can't. So a good listening ear, support through every single thing they do, new activities, new hobbies. If they can't do it, support them, help them, guide them, and just be there for them. When you do have children in your care, I suppose it's really important, like I say, to understand them and know them so well that you can then read signs when they're getting a bit wobbly. Have they gone quiet? Are they spending more time in their room? If you know them well, you should know when something's changed, something's different. And then, you can work on that, have a quiet word, have a quiet space, do colouring where you don't actually have to look at each other, and then go for a drive where the child can't see your face and you can't see them, and just casually talk. How was your day? Did anything affect you today? Do you feel differently? And just slowly conversations will come without you questioning and quizzing them and putting the pressure on them to open up.
Yeah, those side by side conversations are definitely the best. I mean, I remember definitely with my sons when they were younger, there's some gold would actually happen because there
Mm.
was not that pressure. It just seemed like, it could happen without that,
Face
close,
to face. Yeah.
yes, face to
Yeah.
face stuff. I mean, it's so important to me that people understand, especially during Children's Mental Health Week, that these children are carrying additional challenges that won't necessarily show on the outside. If they're being beautifully cared for by a foster carer, they're going to show up in their nice, clean school uniform. They're going to have their packed lunch. They're going to, look like any other student in the class. But they are, of course, carrying their own internal rucksack that's full of potential trauma and grief and confusion and loss. That a lot of that's unseen. How can we encourage, we know teachers aren't therapists and they shouldn't be expected to be therapists, but how can the systems that support these children actually support them with a little bit more awareness around the depth of struggles that they might be going through?
I think at some schools there are, you do have often a liaison teacher who is well practiced with, safeguarding and other issues. But I think that teachers should have training in foster care. What leads to foster care? What are the different situations? And really know about the child as well. So they can totally understand what the triggers are and how this child may be feeling. You have to remember there are so many meetings that children are expected to attend, education meetings where they leave the classroom and have to go to meetings. Of course, every child in the classroom, well, where are they going? What are they doing? And then when the child walks back in again, questions, why do you get to leave class? Why do you have these meetings? It's really quite damaging for them. Children had hated doing these meetings. And then you have children looked after meetings and they're expected to be talking about themselves and what they'd like to do. And they absolutely despised all these meetings. So I think maybe there should be a flip of the meetings that they're expected to be involved in. Could they write something down? Could it be done in a different way? And they used
Because
to
that sounds like a lot of pressure, sorry, jumping in, and also a lot of exposure. It makes them very vulnerable to be seen as different if they're being called out of the classroom. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, even if it was just they're going for a guitar lesson, it's like, where are they going?
absolutely
It
right.
doesn't matter. It's like the light, the spotlight's on them, and then they've come back. What do you do? And that can be really, I would imagine, very intense for a child to have to contend with that additional attention that they don't necessarily want.
Yeah, absolutely. They never sort of fully accepted it because it just highlights, I'm a child in care. I have to go to these meetings. I will leave class for an hour, maybe two. And yes, they didn't want to explain themselves. And then bullying would come. So with the younger one we had, he would be bullied by his classmates because he was able to leave the classroom for a period of time and not have to explain himself when he got back. So yeah, I think Mia, maybe teachers having a bit more in-depth training with fostering and why it happens, and even know about the family maybe so they know what they're dealing with. I mean, it always says
Mm.
on the register, child in care who's vulnerable, that sort of thing, but that doesn't really go deep enough, I don't think. The other thing I would say is that we try and arrange events for other foster children because if you are not familiar with the fostering system, you may not know how many other children are in care. There may be people in your class that you don't know. So, I think foster children think it's only them. They're the only family that are affected because how would they not know? It's not openly spoke about at school. So we do events and you see children's face light up when they see someone they know from school and think, oh, I thought it was only me. So we do a lot of events for the special needs children and we really encourage the children to come along so they can learn they are not the only children in care and everybody's story is different reasons, that sort of thing. But they're always successful, always well attended, and the children love them.
Got that coming together, haven't you?
Yeah.
So rather than feeling isolated and alone and the only one, you've got that shared humanity, that common humanity, which is an aspect of self-compassion, actually. But I'm not the only person here. I do belong. Yes, we've all got different stories, but actually I'm okay just as I am. And I can actually celebrate who I am, even with all the challenges. And that's quite a different shift in mindset, isn't it? When it comes to helping them recognize that they are okay, even with their struggles, even with their difference, even with their challenging history or with all the things that they're navigating, and maybe their friends don't have a clue and are never going to have to navigate things like that. But
No,
they're yeah. Gosh, there's a lot for them, isn't it?
there is a lot. And of course, if you come from a family that's it's been neglectful, you will often be behind them in other children in the class because you haven't got books at home, you haven't got paper to write on and pencils to write on. So, as well as being behind at school and having extra lessons, that sort of thing, you've got the constant feeling of not being good enough. Why are you at the back of the class? Why have you got extra homework? So, the challenges like that as well. to get
And
you to
that,
see which benefits you, but you don't understand that at the time.
yeah, and can feel like a punishment as well. Gosh, extra homework, stay in at break time, come and practice, and that's going to really impact their confidence, the way they feel about themselves, their self-esteem, their self-worth. It's all going to have an impact on their mental health, isn't it?
And if, of course, if they do have underlying conditions like, like ADHD, which has got very common symptoms with trauma, and then to get a diagnosis to understand why you are the way you are, that can be really, I think, stressful for a child as well, having those extra additional needs. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
And certainly a friend of mine, I know her children have gone through that, and
Yeah.
and of course children have to deal with all the different labels. Schools have labels, and I appreciate why we need them up to a point, but having those additional labels, you've got this, and then I think that can be potentially really self-destructive on their self-concept and feeling okay about themselves, because I've got this thing, and yeah, it's because of this, or that they don't truly understand what's happening. And then the judgment comes. So they may feel judged from external sources, but also that self-judgment. And then, of course, they internalize all of that. And there comes the mean self-talk, the self-criticism. And
Mm.
then you're in that negative spiral all the time.
Yeah. I've just thought of something else that occurred to me as we're talking, just that when children go into care, often they've had their freedom taken away from them. They may have had a life at home where they could, go out, play on the streets, whatever. And of course, when you're in care, it's much more secure for your own safety, of course. But there are still limitations because often children need their boundaries. And when you've never had boundaries, all of a sudden is, well, we get up at this time, we do this, then we have a breakfast, then we'll leave for school at this time. They may never have had that routine. So routines, although we all know they're really essential to life, when it's new to you, it's really hard to come to terms with. There's a bath time, there's a bedtime, we do homework, we do reading. It can be really challenging, I suppose, for some children who have had all the freedom, no restraints, and then having to conform and sort of mixing with a family who have followed these rules, regulations, and routines. That would be, I think, quite, very challenging for some children.
Yeah, I really hear you. And of course, we know that that boundary setting, those routines, and having that, it's really good for their circadian rhythms, for their, mental, emotional, and physical well-being, to have those processes in place. But I can recognize also how there would be resistance to that. And of course, then the foster parent has to work with all of that kicking against things that long term we know will support them and will help them feel safe, but actually might in the early days just feel really, really
Yeah,
constricting
yeah.
and restrictive. Gosh, it's a minefield, isn't it, Jo? I really I'm so, so grateful to have this conversation with you, because I really wanted to highlight there's sort of additional challenges for children's mental health, and those that have experienced the need for care and experienced trauma as littlies. I'd really love for there to be a lot more attention paid on, maybe too late for preventative, but really proactive mental health support before they get into crisis, before they hit their adolescence and puberty kicks in, and then their brain can, some of the trauma can be more expressed, from what I understand. So what sort of things do you think could be put in place to, or are you working on in the Foster Care Association, to help all foster care kids in care to really be able to look after themselves a bit more in their inner world? We know that the outer world, they may not be able to control anything, but to help them really feel a little bit more empowered, that they have agency over their thoughts and feelings a little bit more. What sort of things are being put in place, or would you like to see?
Well, you could take it a step further, and maybe before any child comes into care, you're aware that there will be an involvement from social services, and the children could just be a child in need. And at that point, it could be identified that, the family isn't functioning as effectively as it could be. Can we work with the children at this point? So in the event they do get taken into care, they are aware of why they've been taken into care, how and why they're feeling the feelings they're feeling, if there's trauma and neglect in the household, and do it from there. But Sutton have their own therapeutic hub, and there are so many professionals involved with that, as a foster carer for Sutton, you can tap into that resource and get guidance and support. And there are sessions where you learn how to deal with children, how to answer their questions, how to prepare them for their day. There may be breathing techniques, there may be things they take to school that bring them comfort, open questions. And I can't stress enough how important it is to actively listen, because they may ask you the same question the day after and you've forgotten it because you were distracted with something. But really focus your conversations with that child and really show them that you care and you're listening, and they know that they can come to you when they have just things in their thoughts in their heads that they can't unravel. But I think, training and really, like I say before, knowing your children, and look out for those signs that they're worried, they're scared, and then they need help and support. Yeah.
Jo, it's been such a privilege to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise in Children's Mental Health Week. I can't begin to express how much I admire the work you do and every foster carer in the UK that is opening their homes and opening their doors to their heart for these children's hearts and their well-being. It takes a really strong and courageous person to do this work, and I'd just like to honour you and all of the people involved in supporting a child in care, because it really does take potentially a huge amount of skill and grit to keep going when there is a lot of challenge that comes into your home. So thank you for sharing this. I think everyone watching will find it, very inspiring, that they know that the children that are in foster families are being loved and cared for as much as you have cared for, I know, the children that you've looked after. So thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
If you found this curious conversation helpful, the Inner Detective Journal might be just what you need. It's a gentle, powerful way to help young children build lifelong coping skills with kindness from within. Click the link to get your copy for your child, your class, maybe your entire organisation if they've got children, so you can help them through the tough times. Let's keep listening and keep supporting children's mental health together.